new attorneys coming out of the law school, and I've worked with them and happy to do that, as well as help our Central Valley. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Esmeralda Kinney.
I started my career doing family law, so I primarily represented victims of domestic violence. I did occasionally some child custody, and then also some divorce. I have now transitioned to immigration law, and I do representation in immigration court. So I do cancellation of removal, asylum cases, and then I also do the regular family petitions, adjusting status, consular process, and try to work with people to find a way for them to achieve the American dream, become legal permanent residents, and ultimately United States citizens.
Jaskar Gill.
Hey everyone, so right now I primarily do personal injury law. I help or work towards for law students. My caseload ranges from car accidents to slip and fall accidents to medical malpractice cases. Immediately after law school, I did mainly insurance defense. So I handled the defense of those claims. And after a while doing defense work, I figured it just seems always a little bit more rewarding to help regular plaintiffs out. So I transitioned from the defense side to the plaintiff side about 1.5 years ago.
Interesting, thank you. Judge Mims Cochran, how did you decide and or what motivated you to go to law school?
I think I always wanted to be an attorney. I don't know why. And I don't remember the first thought where I decided that. But I can't remember wanting to be anything else. And but life happens, and I'm in college, and I think I was a business major, and I really hadn't taken any steps to become an attorney, to prepare myself to be an attorney. But I was always involved in organizations or companies where I was in a position where I was advocating for someone. So when I was in college, my dad finally asked me, he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm a business major. And at that time, everybody was. And so he said, I thought you wanted to be an attorney. And I said, well, I did, I do. And so what are you doing? What are you going to do to make that happen? And so that's when I shifted. Halfway through college, I shifted, changed my major, and made some changes so that I could prepare myself for law school. So I was a little late to the game, but eventually made it happen.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Dad. Jasper, I'm going to mix this up a little bit and go to you with the same question.
So growing up, I always wanted, I think I was in the medical field. In high school, even in college, I didn't think about law school that much at all. So I graduated from college with a science degree, and then started working as an EMT. And I think during that time, I started really realizing I wasn't really good around in hospital settings. I would get nauseous. I wasn't sure if I could make, the medical field a long-term thing when I'm, getting sick, taking care of patients who really need help. So at that time, I started thinking about what other careers I might decide to go in. And I actually had, I did have a college roommate who was pre-med, and he kind of jumped into the law field. And talking to him, I realized, okay, hey, any major could get you into law school. You just have to take the LSAT and get a decent score. And so, after a couple months, I kind of built up the courage to take the LSAT, studied for it. And then once I got a decent score, I was like, okay, maybe I could do law school. And then I applied to different law schools, and then I ended up making the transition.
Very good, thank you. We're all nodding our heads here about, yes, thinking about the LSAT. Esmeralda.
Well, I was a political science major in my undergraduate degree, and I was always geared towards policy and policy making. And as a first generation student, I always knew that it was really important for me as a Latina to achieve and to eventually go and get a degree, graduate degree, and attend higher education. And because I was always geared towards policy, I took a look into becoming an attorney, and I knew that just getting a JD would open up a world of opportunities for me, even if in the end I didn't want to become an attorney. It would open up avenues for me that wouldn't be available otherwise. And I kind of researched into law schools to see what was out there, applied to law schools, and SJCL was just the perfect fit for me. So I decided to do that, and I'm so glad I did.
Well, good, thank you. Alicia.
Being an attorney is a second career for me. I didn't come to law school until I was in my early 40s, and my first career was in computer science. The computer science field was something that I just landed in. It wasn't really by choice. It was a very good career for me, and very logical, analytical person, which lends itself well to the laws also. And I just needed to be out on my own and support myself, and friends helped me into the computer field. So I eventually got my bachelor's degree in computer science, and the last part of my career before coming to law school, I worked for Johnson & Johnson for about 15 years in their medical device industry. And so I worked in a cubicle, I worked in an office, I sat in front of a computer, all the time. And I'm a people person. So I really wanted to make more of a direct impact in people's lives. And I started researching what that might look like for me. And I really wanted initially to work with victims of crime, giving them a voice, giving them the ability to ask questions of their offenders. And I researched schools that offered I was looking at a master's degree in peacemaking. And so conflict resolution and peacemaking, working with victims and their offenders. And when I researched that, I found that local Fresno Pacific University has a cooperative program with the San Joaquin College of Law. And I thought, well, what better way to empower myself than to both learn how to advocate for victims and also learn what their legal rights are. And so there was only 2 schools that provided a cooperative program, San Joaquin College of Law, and then a school back east in Pennsylvania, which I didn't really want to move that far away. So in 4 years, I've got both my master's degree in conflict resolution and peacemaking from Fresno Pacific University and my law degree. And I think I'm only 2 that have actually accomplished that goal, which I'm really proud of. And then that developed into my learning about consumer protection law. I love working directly with people. I love having a direct impact in their lives. And I couldn't be happier. I could not be happier doing what I'm doing.
Very good. Judge, what challenges did you face in law school? We have a number of students in the audience, and probably every single one of them has some challenge ahead of them in completing law school. What challenges do you feel you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Ooh, I don't know where to start. Well, I'll say I had my son with me when I was in law school. I was a teen mom. I had my son just after graduating from high school. So when I started law school and moved to the Fresno area, I didn't really know anyone. I just knew a few people that went to Fresno State, but I didn't have any family support. And it was a little odd that first year. I don't know if you would remember, but even in my first year when my son would get out of school, I didn't have anybody to pick him up. So I would leave class, start a tape recorder, leave class, go pick him up, come back, stop the recorder. And I did that every day, I think for the first semester, until I found someone to provide transportation between that gap from when he got out of school to after school care. And I really had, I gained somewhat of a family through some of the students there, the faculty, the teachers at my son's school, the parents on his T-ball class. They were all very supportive of what I was doing. When they had games, after the game, they say, "Mom, you go ahead and study, we'll keep him for you." I mean, I just developed a family out of nothing because I really didn't know anyone. When I moved to Fresno, I just knew I wanted to be an attorney, and I was going to do what was necessary so that I could accomplish that goal. But I still wanted to be a good mom. And so moving to Fresno, going to San Joaquin College of Law helped me do both. You know, without the guilt of not being there and not being there for my son, I could do both. And so that made me happy.
Wow, wow, that's fantastic, fantastic. So Esmeralda, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yeah, so the biggest hurdle for me was financing law school, primarily because I was a DUI throughout law school, which means deferred action for childhood arrival, which means I did not have legal status or is not documented, which also meant that I could not obtain financial aid or any federal assistance to fund law school. So I relied predominantly on the assistance of family, but also on scholarships, and SJCL has a wonderful list of scholarships that they give out every single year. So faculty helped me obtain scholarships from outside of the school and just research scholarships. Diane was really wonderful at connecting me with individuals who could help me reach out to local scholarship foundations and other schools that could potentially assist with financing the law school education. And then I worked full-time my very first year of law school to fund that education as well. And SJCL was incredibly accommodating. They do have that afternoon program, which allows students to work throughout law school and then go to school at night. And that was incredibly beneficial because I don't think law school would have been possible for me had that not been available to me. And I don't know very many law schools that offer that kind of assistance. The other hurdle that I had going to law school was just being a first generation student. Anybody or most people who are first generation students just know that you have no idea what you're doing because you don't have anybody who did it before you. One of the great things that I love about this school is that I can relate to the people who attend. I can relate to the student body because a lot of people are here seeking a JD or becoming an attorney as a second career. They have children, they have been in the Central Valley for a really long time. They're predominantly first generation. So I think being a first generation student can already be a very isolating experience because your family has no idea what you're going through. Even if they try to assist, they really don't know what it means. They can't celebrate your accomplishments with you. Like when you get the Wiccan Award, which is for academic achievement, they don't really understand what that means. So they can't be really excited for you. And having other students going through the same experience, other students who get it and who can be that cheerleader for you when members of your family can't, who understand those achievements and can be excited and really root for you when the people that are closest to you can't. It allows you to give the closest people to you, your family, grace, while at the same time having a community that can celebrate you and that can be a shoulder for you. So it was really wonderful having that community here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jessica, how about you?
So there are a ton of hurdles, but I think the biggest hurdle for me was my third year. I got my first real legal job as a clerk. And at that firm, we did a lot of business litigation, a lot of small business litigation who had just a ton of risk in these cases. So I think managing that and law school at the same time led to a lot of stressful nights. And I think during law school, you learn a lot of time management skills, where to spend your time. Professors really hit on that. And one good thing about, I thought the professors here at SJCL did, is they really did a good job breaking down the subjects. So you didn't have to spend a lot of your time you would read a case and it would take a tremendous amount of time just to figure out what that case means. And so the professors did a really good job breaking down what you need to know for the test. And you kind of start learning about where you need to spend your time. And those time management skills, I think, kind of really help you when you start practicing law and realizing where you need to focus your time on. And you know, that includes, you know, spending time with your family and doing things that kind of give you a mental break and some type of mental relief as well.
I'm embarrassed to say that one of the most challenging things for me was overcoming being a perfectionist. Oh, I'm nodding. Okay, good. So I guess many of us wanting to go to law school and become attorneys are perfectionists, and I call myself now a recovering perfectionist. But it was really hard. Law school is so different than regular college, where you can study and maybe do a little last minute work and then still pass your class. That's not the case in law school, and there's so much you can do to study for your course. Read the case opinion, read the footnotes, go get a study book, a study guide, go meet with your study group, work on your work on memorizing law. And I learned, for me, I couldn't do it all, which was really hard to accept. I'm a do-it-all kind of gal. Oh yeah, those 2-degree things. So having to choose, having to make your choices about how to spend your time, learning from the professors where to focus your time and energy was critical. It took me probably 3 years to figure that out. So hopefully those starting in can keep in mind, perfectionism is not your friend in law school. Time management is. The other challenge that I had was probably more personal. When I decided to come to law school and I was accepted here, I was living in San Jose, and my husband and I decided that he would stay living in San Jose during the first year of law school. And that if I graduated or passed my first year of law school, we would then reevaluate him living in San Jose and hopefully moving to Fresno. And so my first year of law school, I moved to a city that I didn't know. I didn't know anybody here. I did not know what freeways to get on. I didn't know where I was going to live. And the law school and the students became my support system. My family did not understand what I was going through. They did not understand moot court or Whitkin Awards or anything like this, just a completely new language to speak. And so for me, my husband and I would trade twice a month on weekends. I would go to see him or he would come to see me. So it really cut down my time with my main supporter, my husband. And I did it. I worked it through because I was making so many new friends here, because I was immersed in this amazing study of the law, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And so my second year, when my husband forgot that he was supposed to move to Fresno with me, I cried until he gave in. And so he actually retired and he moved to Fresno, and we got to be together again. And that was a big deal. But family support is critical. At the same time, helping them adjust to the fact that you're not as available as you used to be is also critical, so that you have time for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is a biggie, so I'm gonna kind of just talk slowly. Think about some case or incident that you were involved with that gave you the greatest satisfaction in your career. And Esmeralda, I'm going to jump back to you on this one, but typically for people, there is some case they worked on where they really helped someone and really gave them a sense of the reason why they were continuing to practice law.
Yeah, so one case that sticks out to me was when I was doing family law. And a young lady had reached out to us because she needed an attorney. Opposing counsel was represented. And it's pretty typical that somebody who doesn't have an attorney would normally seek an attorney, especially when the other side is represented. So I didn't think much about it, and I go with her to her hearing. And I'm this brand new attorney, and I'm really aware of the kind of skills I have not yet developed that come with experience. So I enter this hearing, and here's this judge who has many years on the benches, and he's just wonderful. And then opposing counsel is also somebody who has over 20 years of experience, has been there a long time, and the hearing gets started, and opposing counsel is being incredibly aggressive. And I just felt this big. And I turned to look at my client because I just was beside myself. And my client is just listening. She's just stoic, paying attention to what's going on. And I thought to myself, my God, if I am feeling like this, I cannot imagine what she must have felt like going into that hearing by herself, being against this opposing counsel and not knowing the language. And it was that moment that I thought, I'm going to do everything in my power to get her justice and do what's in her best interest. And we walked away from that hearing getting what we asked for. It wasn't trial, it was just one of the hearings, but we got what we asked for that day. And at the end of it, she thanked me profusely. She just kept on saying, thank you so much, thank you so much. And that's one of the moments that I will forever take in my career, because I knew that day that I was, no matter whether we won that case or lost that case, I had made a difference to her that day. I have, every time one of my clients comes in as well, and just realizes that somebody speaks their language, somebody understands the process, somebody understands the fear of filing something with immigration. I can get confused for the secretary, the paralegal, and the client, but every time a client comes in and says, wow, you get it, that makes a world of a difference to me.
Kleenex needed? No, seriously, Kleenex needed. I remember the first time I went into court for a hearing and opposing counsel was an older man. And he walked up and patted me on the head and said, what's a little girl like you doing in here? And that's rather motivating too.
Yes.
So Judge Ms. Cochran, what case would you tell us about?
I'll give two examples. So I had my practice in Oakland for about 16 years. And in my practice, I helped everyday people. I represented tenants and unlawful detainers, represented either parents or children in juvenile dependency cases, represented children in family law cases, and then also filed affirmative cases against slumlords for not maintaining their property. And I was really grateful to be able to live and work in the community that I grew up in and service my community in that way. And so I thought they were all of my clients, every case was important because you were either fighting for someone's housing or your children. But there was one case that I had where I was representing a young lady. She was adopted into a family, and her adopted sister wasn't able to have children. And so her adopted sister was really actively involved in her life and her children's lives. My client had come up on some hard times and was living in a shelter, and she allowed her daughter to go live with her adoptive sister, and she kept her son with her in the shelter. So as time went on, her adoptive sister got really attached to her daughter and, offered to keep her longer, to help out. And then at one point wanted to adopt her daughter, which she objected to. And she knew that if she objected to her adoptive sister taking her daughter, she would lose her family, because everyone felt sorry for the sister who could not have children. They wanted her to just let her have her daughter. And so we went through this hearing, and she was afraid, and she knew that she was either going to lose her family, lose her daughter. And she was fighting, and it was a struggle to keep her engaged. And at that point, you realize you're somewhat of an attorney, a counselor, a therapist, everything that your client needs you to be to get through that process. And we were successful. She was able to keep custody of her daughter. The adoption was denied, but I was really proud in that moment to be able to be there for her when she didn't have anyone else. And so I was really proud of that case. As a commissioner, again, I approach the cases all the same, and I think they're all equally important. But sometimes what's important to me is things that happen outside of the case. So I was filling in for a traffic commissioner on one day, and there was a gentleman sitting in the audience. And I went through the calendar, got to his case. I let him know that the police officer had contacted the court and wanted to dismiss the ticket in the interest of justice. And so he said, "Thank you. Can I say something to you off the record?" And I said, "Well, no, sir, it's not really off the record, but you're welcome to say whatever you like to say." And so he was sitting there in the audience with a young lady, and he said, I am just proud to see you where you are. And not really for me, but for my granddaughter. For her to see you there is what's important. And that touched me. It still does. That touched me. And so I was proud of what I was doing, not because of any particular decision I made that day or any other day, but just the impact that you have on the people that you encounter with.
Okay. Jeff Hard.
So for me, probably two cases come to mind. The first one, I was still doing insurance defense work, and it was a workers' compensation case, and it ended up being my first trial. And I always remembered I always had a lot of trouble public speaking. I would always get nervous, and I just wasn't sure how this trial would go. But I prepared myself and did a decent job, and I ended up getting a favorable decision. And that case is always going to be memorable to me, because the number one problem I always had through law school, through growing up, was speaking up. And once I got through that, I realized, okay, I could do this. And I think I can still kind of remember myself in that courtroom and going through witness testimony, and just kind of realizing, okay, I can do this. So that case is always going to be memorable to me because it was the first trial I had, and the first moment I realized I could be a lawyer, and that was my second year as being an attorney. And the next case is it's a personal injury case, and this client came to our office after she got a pretty ridiculously low settlement offer after being in a car accident. So what happened with her was she was in this huge motor vehicle accident where somebody ran a red light, and she did what a lot of people do is she didn't get treatment, within a week or within 2 weeks of that accident. And the reason she didn't do it was because she didn't have health insurance. She didn't have a way to pay these bills, and she had a family. So that was the last thing on her mind, was going to see a doctor. But eventually got to the point where her pain got so bad, she had to get care. And these medical bills started piling up, and she told the insurance company about these bills, and they offered to settle her case for a fairly nominal amount. And I think she was going to take it. And then after some decisions, she decided to talk to an attorney, and she came to our office. And even with us as her attorneys, the insurance company was still being unreasonable. And I think for a lot of folks, the idea of not wanting to incur medical bills makes sense. And so that was a case that, we were willing to take it to trial because we knew regular folks would understand her struggles. But it always seemed that the insurance company was just trying to nickel and dime her. And they did put up a fight. And it was a lot of the times, it ended up being close to a 2-year battle because of COVID pushing everything back. And a lot of the times it got to the point where she just wanted to put this behind her. But ultimately she kept wanting, she wanted a fair resolution. And finally, maybe 2 weeks before trial, we finally got a reasonable amount that would cover all her medical bills, compensate for her pain and suffering, and get a fair resolution for her. And so that case is always going to be memorable to me because it shows me that the system's it's gonna work. It might take some time, but if you keep believing what you're doing is right and you put up a fight, you're gonna get something favorable for your client.
Thank you.
Oh, I have so many.
Well, pass down the Kleenex before you give me another one. I'm serious. Before you give me another one, that's gonna make me cry.
I'll try and keep it light, Jan. So the bulk of my practice is vehicle sales, lemon law, manufacturing defects, auto sales fraud. And that's because everybody needs a car. And so there are going to be more consumers buying cars than there are consumers that are buying a home water filtration system. So there was a couple, a husband and wife, who came to me, and primarily Spanish speaking. And the wife had just taken her car into a dealership, and all she needed was an oil change. She worked part-time, her husband worked in the fields, and she made no more than $800 a month in her part-time job. So she goes to the dealership, and she's waiting in the waiting room while the dealership is supposedly doing an oil change. They come back out to her, a young female Hispanic saleswoman speaks to her and says, "We have found something seriously wrong with your car, but we can put you in a new car. And we think we can make this work for your budget." So she ends up leaving, believing that she can afford this brand new car, and comes home, and her husband looks over the paperwork and he says, "What have you done?" She feels terrible. And they came to see me. It turns out that the dealership, there was nothing wrong with her car, that the dealership falsified her income by triple in order to get her qualified for financing, and did not present her with a Spanish language contract. And so I worked very hard against some much more experienced counsel, but I just knew it wasn't right. And I think having that passion to know you're fighting for good and you're fighting for right carries you over a lot of discomfort, a lot of nervousness about, well, maybe I don't have the skills that opposing counsel has. And that family, I'm gonna cry, Jan. That family, years later, still brings me pistachios from the farm. And they just love my husband because he was my intake clerk at the time. And so that's what happens when you're a startup. And they're such a lovely, lovely family. So I was able to get her out of that car, completely out of the car, and the contract rescinded and all her money back. The second case that really comes to mind, and this young man, he was in his early 30s. He came to me. He was starting up his own gas hauling business. He had purchased a big rig from a local dealership and was really excited. It was his first venture out on his own. He wanted to start up his business and support his family. And it turns out that the dealer had these big rigs. They can have 1 million miles on their engine. They just go forever. But this dealer, it was a used truck, and the dealer had rolled back the odometer by more than 60,000 miles. And initially it was a little hard to prove. And initially, I don't know anything about big rigs. And so he educated me, and we worked as a partnership in making sure that his rights were protected under the Federal Odometer Act. And as a consumer protection attorney, I work on contingency basis. I don't get paid until the end of my cases if my client's successful. And the consumer protection laws allow for a fee shifting provision where the defendant pays for my client's attorney's fees. Because when you think about a farm worker, or you think about a young man who's trying to start a business, they don't have the financial resources to go against a large dealership. And these are both large dealerships. And so I did my research, I dug in, I love doing research on cases. And there was a lot of fighting. This case got very close to trial. I think sometimes with new attorneys, defense counsel wants to see how scared you get and whether you're gonna back down. But I just knew I couldn't, and my client didn't want to back down. And so in the end, we got the dealership to settle for what's called a cash and keep. So he kept the vehicle, but he didn't have to pay the balance on the loan. And really what he was looking for was compensation for the difference between the value of that same truck with $60,000 miles less. Well, he called me today. I haven't heard, we haven't spoken in about 2 years. He called me today. He now has 15 rigs. He now has a full staff of people. He has all the special licensing. He has these big clients. And here is this, he's the only young African-American sole business owner that is doing this specialized, highly flammable product, gas, petrol, hauling in California. And I'm just so, it feels a little patronizing when I tell him how proud I am of him, but I am. He fought for his rights, and I felt like I was along for the ride. So that's a case that really sticks with me as well.
Wow. Sorry. Well, let's shift gears a little bit here. Judge Mims Cochran, how difficult was it for you to find your first job?
Ooh, when I moved back to the Bay Area, I really didn't have a lot of connections. So I just started doing whatever I could. And so that's meeting with church members and giving them legal advice, or helping someone with discovery who was served with discovery and they didn't know what to do with it. Representing family members and whatever random thing that came up that they wanted you to resolve. And so I did a little bit of everything on my own for about a year. And I met someone who was a volunteer attorney at the Eviction Defense Center. And so they had some staff attorneys, and then they had other volunteers who would come in once a week to help with jury trials, or to handle affirmative cases against people who were not maintaining their property. So I met this person, and she introduced me to the executive director at the Eviction Defense Center, Ann O'Mora, and recommended me for a staff attorney position. And so I started working at the Eviction Defense Center, and I stayed there for about 2 years, representing tenants and unlawful detainers. And it was the best experience ever, because I was in court almost every day. I was in jury trials almost every Friday. I appeared in front of numerous judicial officers, got to know them, their staff, and I was just like a fixture almost in the courtrooms. I was always in court. And so it was an amazing job. I had an opportunity to do good work for great people, and kind of get comfortable in a courtroom in a way that I wasn't comfortable before. I think when I was at San Joaquin, I would get really nervous whenever I had to speak. I mean, my moot court partner and I were probably a hot mess, because he would start to shake his arm and my voice would quiver. So we were partners. And so whenever we had to go out, we were a hot mess. But when you start practicing, no matter what your fears are, when you start practicing, your client doesn't have time for all that, right? And so all that falls by the wayside, and your instincts and your training and your practice kicks in, and you do your job. And so I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to work at the Eviction Defense Center, because it made me comfortable in the courtroom. The courtroom was like my second home after that job.
Wow. Jessica, how
Easy, difficult, let's get your job, correct?
how difficult was it to get your first job? Or if it wasn't, that's fine too.
So I was working at a business litigation firm my third year of law school. And then I saw a job posting at a firm that I thought I'd really like. And so when I decided to apply, and I took the interview, and during the interview, I just realized I'm gonna love this place. And I got a good sense that they had the same feeling, that they would enjoy working with me. And maybe a couple of days later, I got a phone call that I got the job. And I just knew that that's the job I wanted straight out of law school. I really admired the people that worked at this firm, and I knew it was gonna be a great fit. And I just remember how thrilled I was that I got that job. So for me, fortunately, it was fairly easy. I think I got lucky. And so right after I took the bar, right after graduating, I think my first day my first day of work was maybe a week later. And I worked as a law clerk until I got my bar results. And right when I got my bar results, they told me, hey, would love you to join the firm as a practicing attorney. And so I think I was just really blessed, and that I got that job. And yeah, it was one of the job postings on the San Joaquin board that has all the jobs that are available. So I was pretty happy with how quickly I was able to get that first job.
And every moment that he was speaking about that, did you see the smile? It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a great feeling when you get that first job.
Okay, Alicia, I'm gonna jump back to you.
I was in a unique situation where right after graduating law school, and I was within my first 3 weeks of bar prep, my beloved mother-in-law passed away. And I had the choice. I could either ignore my family, ignore my husband's pain, and ignore my pain and keep studying for the bar, or I could be there for my family, which is what I chose to do. So I didn't take the bar. And then the next round came and I was still grieving and my family was still grieving and I didn't take the bar. And then the next time the bar came around, I didn't take the bar. And then the next time that came around, I did not take the bar. I think part of it was that I was really burnt out from having done both the master's and the JD degrees at the same time. I did not really have time to do internships or clerking for a firm. And it took me 4 years after graduating law school before I took the bar. And I passed. I knew I passed after I took it. I studied really hard for it, but while I was choosing not to take the bar, I still needed to work. And there's an assumption that if you are looking for work and you haven't passed the bar, that you have failed the bar. So I'd have to put on all my resumes, I haven't taken the bar yet, and that didn't look good either. So it was really hard for me to find a job during those 4 years. I ended up working for, I love to create Duncan Enterprises here in the Valley because I'm a big crafter and they needed someone to help them with their copyrights and trademarks. And I have a computer science degree and I'm really analytical, and you don't have to be a practicing attorney to do those things. So I worked for them for about 8 months. I really enjoyed that. And then I decided that was right before studying for the bar. I actually started a whole business during those 4 years, doing something else, and finally let go of that business and then took the bar. And then right after I took the bar, I volunteered at the local legal aid services, Central California Legal Services, in their landlord tenant area, and really enjoyed that. Really felt a lot of passion for that work. And then I got the bar results and kept working for them. For some reason, they didn't want to hire me as a full-time associate attorney, but that's their loss. But the attorney that I did end up working for, William Krieg, he did a lot of pro bono work with the Central California Legal Services. And he'd been looking for to hire an associate. And I saw his ad and I applied, and 2 weeks go by and 3 weeks go by. And I know I am an odd duck. My resume looks weird. But because I was working at Central California Legal Services, he asked around, he asked the attorneys that he knew that worked there to kind of check in on me. So I had these very strange visits. These attorneys that worked there, and they'd introduce themselves and I'm like, what is going on? But it turns out that he had asked them to check up on me, and then we talked, he and I talked, and he had some legal questions for me. It was very interesting, but we got along great. I went to the interview. I brought him a full brief on the legal questions he was asking me about landlord tenant law, because that's what you did back then to get a job. You put yourself, made yourself stand out from the others. And he hired me, and it was just fantastic because I didn't know about consumer protection law, and he taught me. And I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Wow. Okay, so there's a big debate right now about changing the bar exam and how the bar exam should be changed. Most of the proposals look at testing fewer substantive subjects, but a much greater emphasis on practice skills and writing skills. So, Judge, what skills would you prefer to see the attorneys that appear before you have more improved? I figure you're in a really good position to observe that.
I appreciate experience, right? When we have, sometimes you have attorneys that come in that are inexperienced, or you can tell that they have limited practice, right? So some things that are very practical, some things that are professional courtesies, things that attorneys just normally do because you've been practicing for a very long time. When you have someone that has very limited skills and very limited experience, you just have to be patient. And so from the bench, I constantly try to remind myself to do some of the things that other judicial officers did for me, which was be patient in my moments where I was inexperienced. So I personally, I appreciate experience, and I appreciate someone who has a variety of experience and not just a certain field of practice or certain limited life experience, because that speaks a lot. You know, all of our life experiences determine how we react to any given situation. So I just appreciate diversity.
Thank you, thank you. Charles, what do you think? Your experience today, what skills do you think it's most important that people have as much as possible coming out of law school? Now, how they're going to test on these things, I don't know, right?
I think really reading and writing is given. I think that has to be strong. I think thinking creatively about potential solutions is really good as well. Thinking outside of the box for your clients to potentially come up with a solution. And then the time management, I think several of us have mentioned the time management of here, but learning when to stop working and go home and take a break, and then learning where to pick up and prioritizing work. And yeah, those are important skills.
Wisdom?
I think one of, well, several of the skills that I would like to see students come out of law school with more is professionalism, courtesy, and respect for the bar, for other attorneys, whether they're on your side or opposing counsel, and with the judge. It's been a little shocking to me to see practicing attorneys be less than professional in this field. And I think that as a woman, sometimes I wonder, is this because I'm a woman? I don't put up with it anyway, but it's sometimes a little shocking. There have been times when I've seen judges allow counsel on the record berate other counsel and to be dismissive of them. That's really frustrating. And so I think there could be more emphasis on professional rules of conduct, frankly. And then as Meralda said, really good writing skills. And in my field, and perhaps with Jazz as well, because we are litigation attorneys, getting students that come out of law school that know what discovery is, that know how to take a deposition or how to propound interrogatories, that I really missed not having that experience. Could be because I didn't work for a law firm during law school, and so I didn't get that task assigned to me, but I don't know how you deal with that on the bar. But personally, I think that more essay, analytical thinking, creative thinking on the bar exam needs to stay and stay strong.
Thank you. I don't know if it existed then, but we do have a pre-trial civil practice class and a pre-trial criminal practice class. So hopefully some of those things are being taught in that class. They're supposed to be. So that's good.
Yeah, for me, I always felt like the most important thing for lawyers is it's having good analytical skills. And that kind of includes, reading comprehension and communication skills. A lot of the times when I first became a lawyer, I would get a potential client and they would tell me what they wanted to do. And whether it's an insurance company or an agent or a victim of an injury case, they would tell me kind of what they want. And I think as a lawyer, I would try to get them exactly what they wanted, especially in the beginning. And oftentimes I felt like, you know what, I don't think that's a remedy we could get, or, I don't think we could go that route. And what I would do is I would always schedule a meeting with a partner or somebody with more experience to explain that to them. And now that I'm gaining more experience, I'm getting much more confident in being able to tell a client, no, this is the route that we should take it, and here's why. And I think when you kind of become a lawyer, you can understand the law, but a lot of it's communicating it to somebody who doesn't really know what potential remedies are. And that's a skill that I think it's important to a client, because you want to be able to give them a reasonable expectation of what the end of this litigation, the end of this claim, the end of this case is going to lead them to. You don't always just want to hear from a client what they expect and you tell them, yeah, that's what we're going to do, because when it comes to resolving the dispute, they're probably not going to be happy unless you kind of give them a clear idea of what they're going to expect. And that's still something that I feel like I'm still working on. But being able to do that, I think is a very important for lawyers to know.
Well, all of you have been at SJCL at different times, but I'm going to let you go ahead and start. And this is probably an easy question. What is your best memory of San Joaquin College of Law? And then you can tell your worst one too. And if it's a particular professor, you can kind of hint at it. So we know who you mean, but we don't have to use the name.
The thing that I remember most about SJCL is probably my first day in torts.
Oh, good, that wasn't me.
Yeah, Professor Goodrich. So we're, I think for college students, first day is kind of the day you go over the syllabus. It's the day that the professor tells you what to expect of the class. And so before the first day of class, we had some reading assignments assigned. And I think a lot of us just kind of briefed over the cases. We never really, for me, I never really read an actual case before. And in torts, what Professor Goodrich did is she spent most of the time grilling students on what the reading actually was. And some of the blank stares when the students, when they would get asked a question about this case, it was just something that was pretty memorable to me, about having to be prepared for each day of law school. So that's kind of something that always kind of stuck out to me.
Esmeralda.
I think for me, it was putting things into practice. So things like moot court, where you actually gave oral argument, you wrote a brief. I took the criminal trial class, and that was really great as well, watching every student go up and make their argument like as if they were in trial. We got to be the witnesses sometimes, so that was fun, having a different perspective, just watching what everybody was good at, and then just picking little things from each student that you wanted to implement when you eventually go into practice. So I really enjoyed those aspects where we got to put the things that we learned into practice and then get feedback from our professors, from other attorneys in the community who came to volunteer. And we got some really great feedback from them that I think I could carry into something practical like my career.
Judge, what do you think?
Interestingly enough, I think it was moot court. I've already said I hated public speaking. And so you're waiting for your turn, my heart's pounding out of my chest. and then you push through, right? You finish, you make it through. And the feedback that I was given, I still remember it. One of the judges, she said, you know, yes, you were nervous, but it's your voice. It's the tone of your voice. It's the passion in your voice. It's your expression. It's how you hold yourself, how you carry yourself. And I still remember that. And so that was a moment that I will never forget. And then a funny moment, I had a contract review once, and my son went with me because I didn't have any childcare. And so we're sitting through the review and I'm taking my notes and he's sitting there quietly. And then all of a sudden he just couldn't take it anymore. And he says really loudly in a whisper that was not a whisper, "What is a widget?" So yeah, those are my experiences that I found memorable.
You get to finish stuff on that one.
Yeah, I'd also have to say moot court for those of you who are thinking about coming to law school. Moot court is simply practice trial, practice argument. And when I was in law school, we had I think 3 rounds where you were given a side to argue, and I had a partner and he was to argue one side, I was to argue the opposite position. And I really studied for that and I worked really hard at that. And we write a brief. And so the first night rounds of moot court, I was nervous, I argued. One of the judges asked me a question and it was a very clear question, but it just shocked me because I was on a roll and she interrupted my roll. And she asked me the question, like, don't you have any other case law to support your position? And I just, could you repeat that question? Because I just needed a moment, and I did. And so I argued the other case opinions and moved forward. So I moved forward to the next night and I argued the opposite position. And got praise for that. I was nervous too, but I've got a big mouth. And so it wasn't that bad for me. And then the next night, that night I learned I was going to the final moot court. It was going to be the final 4. And everybody got to argue their original positions except me. I had to argue the opposite position that I had studied so hard to do well on. So I called my moot court partner who knew that side better than me. And I said, and matter of fact, it was Pat. Pat, when she called me to tell me, I said, you have got to be kidding me. And Pat told me, the panel thinks that if anybody can step into this role and argue the opposite position, it's you, Alicia. I'm like, well, I don't know about that, but I'll give it my best shot. And I call my partner and we're done in the evening with moot court. So he is with me at my house, preparing me all through the night, I think maybe I got to sleep at 4 a.m. for a while. And then I came to final moot court and thankfully I was not the first person called. And I was the 3rd person called, or the last person called. And so I got to see how the judges poked and prodded and questioned. And I had some arguments I was ready to give. And I thought, I can't do that. I know where that's going to lead. They're going to lead me down a rabbit trail I can't defend. And so when it was my turn, I just stuck to my guns. And the final question was something about a sentence. And I said, well, I think the key word in that sentence is it's possible. And then I shut up. And I had no idea. I thought I just messed up. So we wrap it up and we go into another room and they're announcing best brief finalists and moot court winner, Alicia Hinton. And I thought, why? And it was both the most terrifying moment and the happiest moment. And I really wanted to go up to the judges, these are real court judges, and say, why? But I was afraid to, well, you were just the best of the worst is what I was afraid of. But moot court is such a terrifying and invaluable experience as part of law school. The other wonderful things here is that I got to make friends with the staff, with the professors, and really lifelong friends with the students that you're kind of struggling through the same issues with. So that's my feedback.
Very good. Very good. Well, yes, ma'am.
You have a question from somebody in the audience, Veronica Reynoso. Do you want to turn your camera on and your microphone on and ask the question? Veronica?
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm here. Hold on. Hi. So I wanted to know what the workload is like and how you handle that workload. I have anxiety, so that's one thing that worries me. What does a typical workday look like?
I'll let them answer. If you remember what a typical day is while you're going to law school, probably very different between the three of you. And everybody's afraid to answer.
So I did a day division, and what I recall about that, there were 2 classes that were an hour and 20, hour and 30 minutes long around that, Monday to Thursday. So it's about 3 hours a class a day. And the classes weren't really the time consuming part. The time consuming part was preparing for the classes, doing all the readings. And we would get a break. You would get a syllabus of what the reading was for each class every, at the beginning of the semester. And so I think what I did was I would kind of block out some time every week to finish the readings. I think every class you were graded on a final that was at the very end. And so I think 2 weeks leading up to the final, I would try to devote as much study time as I could, where I could just focus on the finals. And what would assist you is making sure that you're doing all the reading and making sure that you're preparing an outline of the class every week. So you're kind of keeping up on what you need to know for that final as the semester goes on, instead of just cramming at the very end. So I think the best thing, it kind of does come down to time management.
So Veronica, I understand the anxiety portion of that because I have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, D, and E for everything I do in my life. And I had a little unorthodox approach to law school because I really paid attention to what I was good at, what I was not good at, and then what my body and my mind were telling me. So I tried to stick to a schedule, and particularly when I was working, I tried to stick to a schedule so that things would get done on time. I did the night program and then I transitioned over to the day program. And during the night, when I was working full time, it was really important to stick to that schedule, but I would sneak in things when I could. If I knew I was having a celebration on Saturday after work or on my lunch break, I would pull out my books and start reading. And then when I transitioned over to the day program, it was a little bit easier for me to be flexible. If I didn't get a good night's sleep that day and I just needed to sleep in a little bit longer, then I would push my study time a little bit later into the afternoon. Or if I had a birthday party to celebrate that afternoon, I would get up early and make sure that I got my studies done. So I had a to-do list and I had a calendar. I made sure my deadlines were met, but I really listened to my mind and my body and what that was telling me. And if I needed a break, it was really important for me to take that break because I knew in the long run, if I didn't, I wasn't gonna get anything done. So I think know yourself really well, know what you're good at, and just create your schedule and work around that and adapt if you need to.
I have the same comments. I would also add, be really careful about your expectations of yourself. Things that you might normally be able to get done completely in the real world, you can't get done in law school. It's not possible. And so I think you can be very successful in law school and very successful and not get it all done. So I had to learn that. I had to learn that even if I didn't get all the reading done, if I didn't understand what the case opinion was saying, if I hadn't gotten my memorization in, if I hadn't, and I really beat myself up about that. And M&Ms were my friend. So chocolate was my stress reliever. Some people it was working out. Other people it was meditation or whatever else it was, spending time with family. So really manage your expectations of, and talk to people in law school, talk to the professors about expectations, because that first year of law school, you are adjusting your perspective about success in a big way. And so just go into law school knowing that you can't study in the same way that you did before and be successful in the same way. That there's really much more focus on self-care. And as I said earlier, cramming the night before doesn't work in law school. You cannot do it. So managing your time very well, planning it out well ahead of time, and those students will be very successful.
Judge, do you have something to add to that?
I agree with what everyone has said so far. The only thing I would add is be kind to yourself, right? It's very difficult. For me, as a mom, there were times when I was studying for hours. And, it was just my son in the house with me, and he'd say, okay, how long are you going to read today? And I said, well, give me until 12. So, okay, what time is that? 12:00? Yes, 12:00, because he was in elementary school. And so he'd come back exactly at 12 o'clock and he said, okay, are you finished? No, I'm not finished. Well, how much more time do you need? Okay, give me to 2 o'clock. And so he'd come back exactly at 2 o'clock. And then there was a certain point where even though I'm not finished, I have to put the book down. You have to put the book down and you have to be available for your family or your loved ones. And you're not going to finish everything in a way that you probably want to. And you have to be kind to yourself. You have to have a consistent schedule. And I think that's really important. So I agree with what everyone said. You just kind of have to know yourself, know your limits, and be kind to yourself.
Well, we want to be sure to allow the people who are tuned in to ask other questions. So does anyone have another question before we have some closing remarks? I'm sure that you actually have hundreds of questions. And if you have one, probably other people do too. And I have been known to say that in class as well. So. Okay, well, I'll give each of you an opportunity now to talk about what you want them to know about going to law school and whether you encourage people to go to law school. I do, because people are screaming at me that they need to hire people, but that's not actually what I expect you to address. So anybody want to jump in and go first? Judge, you want to go first?
I guess so. The only thing, what I wanted to say is that everyone has a different path. And you won't find one right path. If you want to be an attorney, go to law school, right? Go to law school. And if one door closes, go to the next one. If one opportunity closes, go to the next one. And don't let anyone determine what your life is going to be in that way. Right. I think that People get caught up in titles and where they think they should be. And I have always been of the belief that you are exactly where you need to be and make the best of it wherever that is. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Want to start from there?
Sure. For incoming students, you don't have to know exactly what the end game is. I did not know I was going to be so passionately in love with consumer protection law. There were students that I went to school with that thought they wanted to do litigation, but they're really awesome judge clerks and research attorneys. So experience, be open to various experiences in law school. Really try out different things. I clerked one summer for the DA's office. I clerked for a criminal defense firm. I did various things in the summer when I could, and none of those were a good fit. It was a little frustrating, but as the judge said, keep going, keep trying. Usually the best outcome is not one you planned, and that's what happened for me. I will also say from a personal note that one of the most critical things that I learned in law school and in the 4 painful years after law school, when I just wasn't ready to take the bar, is I learned how to fail. As an attorney, you will not always win. As an attorney, the judge will not always rule in your favor, no matter how much you believe you're right and your position is right and that the judge is not reading the law correctly. And I did not know how to fail. School has always been easy for me. Life has always just opened up for me. But I was terrified of failing the bar. It came down to that. And the 4 years between graduating and taking the bar, I failed at many things. And I finally learned, oh, this is what it's about. I don't have to keep failing. I mean, I'm going to keep failing, but it doesn't have to be a big deal. I failed at almost everything now in these past 4 years. I get it. I get it. If I fail the bar, so what? I'll take it again. And once I reached that point, and it's similar to, you can't study enough in law school, there's not enough time. You can't take care of yourself well enough in law school, there's not enough time. And so for me, law school was really about learning to do good enough, to do well enough, to give it your best, and that will work out. So I encourage all the perfectionists out there to just lighten up, be kind to yourself, let it go, and really enjoy learning something new. Learn enjoying a new way to study, learn enjoying a new way to make friends, learn and just enjoy learning, because that's all law school is. And that's what being an attorney is you don't have all the answers. You go to the code book, you go to the case opinions, and I'm constantly learning every single day. So that might be crazy advice, but learn how to fail gracefully, really is what it's about. Thank you.
And that's one of the great things actually about law. It's flexible. If the cases are all available in a certain area, you can learn the new area. What you're learning in law school is the skills basically of how to teach yourself in a new area. And I don't think I've learned yet not to do this and this and this and this and this, because it has to get done. So that's probably.
I completely agree with the failure thing that you were talking about, but I thought about going to law school for a while, and I would talk myself into it, then I would talk myself out of it, and I would talk myself into it, and I would talk myself out of it, and I said, well, I'm going to, but the time's got to be right. And I feel like going to law school is like having a kid. It's never going to be a good time. Just go ahead and do it. And I think my sister-in-law was the one that I had been talking to her about doing it, and she was like, just apply, just go ahead and do it and apply. So I finally summoned up the courage to go ahead and do it. And I agree, I didn't have an end game for going to law school, but the skills that I learned in law school are so invaluable. You learn how to think in a different way, you develop those writing skills. And I know plenty of people who came out of law school who didn't end up being an attorney, but they ended up getting a job somewhere else where they use the skills that they learned in law. So just do it. If you're thinking about it, just do it. You won't regret the decision.
Yeah, I agree. I think being a lawyer is such a, I mean, I enjoy being a lawyer and generally enjoy going to work. It's such a rewarding career. I think I'll just conclude by saying, you know, why I think SJCL was a great fit for me. I went to undergrad down in LA, and I had each of my classes were between 100 and 300 students. You couldn't really engage with professors. And I remember when I started thinking about, which law schools I should go to, I sat in a class here at SJCL before I decided which law school to go to. And I just remember the professor knowing every student's names. And I thought that was just so unique, and it really showed me how just engaging SJCL is, and how you really could get that one-on-one professor time if you're struggling in an area. So I think that's what really drew me to SJCL was, not having a class full of 100 to 300 kids where the professor just lectures the entire time. You actually get to personally engage with every professor here.
And in some classes, you have to, because
Yeah.
you will get zeroed in on and questioned for 20, 30 minutes. But it's all part of developing your thinking skills and to think on your feet. And that's a very important part of legal education.
Yeah.
So,
Jan, excuse me, there's a question for just Lauren. How many cases do you handle?
Oh, man. In
At one
practice,
time, yeah.
between 80 to 100.
Wow.
And so that's why I think there's a need for more lawyers, because a lot of lawyers kind of handle that type of caseload.
yeah, but they're all at kind of different stages.
Yeah, they're all-
They aren't all going to court on the
Yes,
same day.
some are, maybe 20% are kind of just on standby. Some are just starting out. They're all in different stages.
Along those same lines, people want to know how long is a typical workday?
That varies. Some days you're there 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. depending on what things are like. There is a lot of weekend work, but if you schedule, you can definitely schedule vacation time, days off with your family, and also I think it depends what type of field you're in. There's been when I was in insurance work, my schedule was 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, rarely work weekends. Now that I do personal injury, there's a little bit more at stake. So you kind of get more dedicated to your cases and want to put in a little bit more time. So I think it depends what field you're in. But I would say typically I work 8 to 6, and then maybe two Saturdays a month.
Wow. Esmeralda, you think that's comparable?
I work from 7:30 to about 5:30, and then about 2 Saturdays a month. But I think it really depends on the firm, and I think it really depends on what area you go into. The prior job that I had, I was working 8 to 5. I got a lot of the school holidays off. I had a good amount of vacation time. They were incredibly flexible. And then I transitioned to something that requires a little bit more time, but it all really depends on what you want to do, what law firm you end up in. But even despite the larger caseload and the longer hours, I absolutely love what I do, and I don't mind the hours because I'm enjoying it the entire time.
Alicia, and then I'm gonna ask the judge.
As a solo practitioner, I wear many hats. I'm a marketer, I'm a bookkeeper, I'm a trainer. I have to watch for taxes. I am an IT person. There's about a million hats that I wear. And so I have to structure my time so that typically during the week, I try to do my caseload. And my caseload, I don't take any more than 15 to 16 cases. I find that partly because my time needs to be focused in some other areas to run the business. But at one point I had 48 cases and I was working really around the clock, and it burnt me out very quickly. But as a solo practitioner, my time is the time that I spend now is more focused. I've learned to manage my time better. What used to take me a week or 2 weeks to do as a new attorney now takes me an hour. And so you get more efficient and more productive. But my caseload and my hours right now are, I usually work from 8 or 9 o'clock because, you know, my boss doesn't care if I come in late. I'm usually home by 7:30, sometimes 8. I work every Saturday is when I work on my bookkeeping and paying bills and doing marketing. And then I am very, very strict about keeping my Sundays to my family and not coming into work. It's not always successful, but that's my structure that I like to keep. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays are my late nights. I have a lot of energy at the beginning of the week since I've taken Sunday off. And Thursday and Friday, I'm starting to wind down. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I love being my own boss. I will say that not everybody's built to be a solo practitioner, but it works really well for me, and I'm really grateful I went that route.
Judge.
Well, I would agree. When I worked for someone else, I usually would work somewhere between 8 and 9 in the morning until 7. And if I had a trial, then I worked a couple of weekends. In private practice, I agree with Alicia. You're wearing so many different hats. I found myself working probably somewhat almost every day at various hours. Sometimes through the night. There were times when there was a hot issue and I'm preparing a motion, and I would say goodnight to my husband and I'm working on that motion until 6 a.m. and he's getting up when I'm going to bed. But that wasn't always all the time. That's just whenever there was a particular issue. But I've stayed up through the night several times working on cases. But as a solo practitioner, you are constantly in this day and age where technology is right at your hand. You're emailing, you're texting, you're calling, you're in court, you're running from courthouse to courthouse, depending on how many cases you are managing. And so if you add that, and then you are active in the community, if you're going to bar functions, if you're going to meetings during lunch or after work, or if you're on committees, you add all that into it. But it wasn't work and it wasn't difficult because I was doing what I love to do. I loved it. And so I was never tired. I was never exhausted. I never felt that it was too much because I was doing what I love to do.
And someone made a comment that it depends on the firm you're working for, and that is very much the case. There are some firms that have a strict 8-5 rule, and whatever you need to get done, you need to get done in that period of time. So it's something that when you start looking for a job, and bearing in mind that right now there are lots of options open, you take some of that into consideration. But it is not, it's not an easy profession, but balanced against that is all the satisfaction that you've heard people express. So, yes.
Jan, there's a question I think maybe you might be best to answer is, what are all the different types of jobs you can go into with a Juris Doctor degree?
You mean outside actually practicing law?
Yeah, with a JD degree, with a Juris Doctor degree, what are all the other jobs?
Oh,
someone
good
can-
gracious, I wouldn't even know where to begin. You can work in human resources. We have a significant number of grads that are in-house counsel for all different kinds of businesses, ag businesses. That you can be counsel for an irrigation district. We have had a grad who was I guess it's the Secretary for Human Resources for the entire state of California, and was the one responsible for implementing the new health laws. We've had a grad who was the chair of the Water Resources Control Board for years and years and years. Virtually any area that you want to impact, there's a role that a lawyer can play in that, if that's what you're interested in doing. And that's why, you know, long ago, we adopted this catchphrase, 1 degree, a world of options, because that's literally true. You could be counsel for a hospital. Some of our grads are counsel for all the major hospitals in the area. So it just goes on and on. It just depends upon where your interest lies. So I think we're going to wrap up. You got anything else to say? Anything you want to hammer home for the audience?
I would add that when you go into law school, if that's what you decide to do, that you write down your motivating, what motivates you when you enter law school, what motivates you to get into law school. Because there are times during law school you'll forget because you're overwhelmed and you're frustrated, and go back to that. There were many times I went back to, why am I doing this? And I would go back to my original inspiration and I would remind myself, oh yeah, this is why I'm here. I want to work directly with people. I want to impact their lives. I think this is the way to do it. So I do encourage people to write down what your dreams and goals are and then refer back to it when you're struggling a bit.
Wow, that's good advice. I wish I had a pen. That's where I'm
I'll
going.
make a note about the pandemic because I graduated right in the middle of the pandemic, and there was so much uncertainty about jobs, about the bar, just everything was unclear. And I had a job before I even finished law school. And they were paying me an attorney's salary before I even knew that I completed the bar or that I had passed the bar. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I had a really great experience, even though I graduated through the pandemic, because I got sworn in by a judge that I really admired. And it was a very intimate moment where I got to bring my mother in, who was a farm worker, who didn't get past a 6th grade education. And I brought in my husband and my uncle, and we got to sit in this little courtroom and they got to watch me be sworn in, and it was an amazing experience. So I want that for people like me and for people who are thinking about going to law school, to have those moments where they never saw themselves in a position of being an attorney, and now here they are being sworn in. So.
Fabulous.
I think just as a closing, I just always thought SJCL was such a cordial and friendly environment. You know, I think every student has some struggles through law. Students gets anxiety, gets stressed out about law school. And I've always felt what always helped me was talking to other students, just kind of, because they were always going through the same thing I was going through. They always felt the same way. And I don't know, that always kind of helped me when, maybe I was stressed out about a test, about reading. So that's what I'll close with.
Judge Mims Cochran, what do you have to add?
Just that if you are thinking about law school, please do it. I will say, and some of you probably have the same experience, you always run across someone who would say, oh, I wanted to be an attorney. I wanted to do that once. And for whatever reason, they didn't pursue that, but it's still in their heart because they're bringing it up to some random person, right? I apologize. And so if you're interested in the law and becoming an attorney, follow your heart and go for it. Don't sit and wait, and don't set aside a dream if that's your dream. Go for it. You can do it. There's support that's available for you. And I wish you luck. I really appreciate being available for everyone this evening and engaging in this discussion. And I wish you all luck in your pursuit. And I hope to see you on the other side of the bench one day.
We really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with us and talk with the students. It's important for them to see people functioning in all these roles. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we wish you all well in the upcoming LSAT. And we look forward to talking to you in the future, all of our applicants. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, guys. That was great. That's always so much fun, except when I cry.